Hello, everyone, and welcome to Claris Community Live. It's my pleasure today to introduce a whole panel of Claris engineers, product managers, and evangelists to answer your questions about FileMaker 2025. And as we get started, please do answer our few questions. We just want to know a little bit about where you're joining us from and what experience you've had so far with FileMaker 2025, AI, and Claris Studio. And while you do that, I will let our panel introduce themselves, starting with a couple of the new faces, Derek Wang.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Derek Huang. I'm a software engineer at Claris, working primarily on FileMaker server and more recently, the AI model server. Happy to be here and so excited to share what's going on in AI at Claris with everyone here. Up next, I'd like to welcome Derek Lee.
Thank you, Derek. Hi, like Derek said, my name is Derek Lee. I'm also working on the server and AI model server as well. I'm extremely excited to talk to you guys today, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Clay.
Oh, I'm Clay Mackel. I've been at the company. I've been at Claris since 1987, so I've seen almost everything. Let me pass it to Rick, who's almost been at the company almost as long. So
yeah, I'm Rick Kelman. I'm the Claris platform evangelist. Been at the company for 25 years, and Clay still calls me newbie. Come
on. And then I'm Robert Holsey, one of the product managers here, working most recently on Claris Studio, but have been around for quite a while as well. I worked on pretty much all the client at some point, and also very excited to continue this conversation.
Hi, and I realized I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Rosemary Teege. I'm the community manager, and I've been at Claris a few months longer than Robert, actually. And also joining us is Angie Wang, our Director of Community and Learning. And just let me share the poll results with everybody. So largest country represented is Canada, actually, followed by the US and Japan. And then also Australia and New Zealand, I saw. So in terms of if people have watched the previous 4 community lives, it looks like about 80% of the audience or the people who have responded watched the LLM episode, and about 2/3 have seen the others. So it looks like most of the audience has some background, at least, in what we've covered. And in terms of deploying AI-powered apps with FileMaker in production, handful in production, 1/3 in development, 1/3 are planning to, and 25% I don't know where to start. And that, just so you all know, matches pretty closely to what we've seen from prior sessions. And then for have you used Claris Studio? 40% said yes and have at least one view in production. 1/4 are testing, 15% are considering it, and about 1/4 have not yet used Claris Studio. So I'll leave that open for a little bit longer. And our plan for today is to basically cover the same blocks of content we covered in the Community Live episodes in the 2 weeks after launch. So we'll start with Derek and Derek talking about AI, and then Robert will do a little bit about Studio, with Clay maybe talking about OData and a few other things, and then Rick and Clay will wrap up with the rest of the FileMaker features. And so each of them will give a brief recap just to make sure everybody is a little bit grounded, and then we'll have the Ask Me Anything portion. So with that, Derek, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rosemary. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. So yeah, for FileMaker 2025, we introduced a lot of new script steps and calculations that enable AI throughout your databases and also with the server itself. So here we have perform find by natural language, SQL query, a couple actions with retrieval augmented generation, And we have some options with customizing models with regression model and fine-tuned model. So I'm going to start off with this crazy demo here. I'm going to use Siri to go ahead and ask information about my database. So Siri, perform find by natural language. Show me players who have scored more than 1,000 points. So in the background, FileMaker is performing the script to use the perform find by natural language. As we can see here, we have a find for players that have more than 1,000 points. And that's pretty cool. It's enabling AI into our database, and we're performing FileMaker finds all from within this FileMaker Pro. So that's the first script step that we use to perform find by natural language, which will enable us to search for records using natural language. We also have another script step called perform SQL by natural language, which will allow users to prompt FileMaker databases using natural conversational language. As you can see here, we support different model types such as Anthropic or our own AI model server. Last on this slide, we have configure prompt template, which will allow users to define and customize the structure of AI prompts used in perform find, perform SQL query, and perform RAG action. So this has a lot to do with the natural language prompts, so we can customize those to get the results that we may find. So taking a step deeper, we have the generate response from model script step. And what this does is it allows us to enable agentic operations with advanced prompts, conversational memory, and tool calls using AI model given a user prompt in natural language. Here, users can execute SQL queries or even call custom functions using AI. So we're going to go ahead and take a little demo here. I'm going to go ahead and ask what the temperature of the city of my current zip code is. So if you ever ask this to chat GPT, it doesn't know where you are, or it doesn't know your zip code. So in this scenario, I've set up some custom functions to provide the city that I'm located in and also the zip code for the city. So now if I send this prompt, you can see that it's able to generate a response here, and it also uses some tools as well. So that's a very powerful script step for users to use.
Right.
Now I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Derek Kwong to talk about RAG.
All right, next up is RAG, which is short for retrieval augmented generation. And to do RAG, we actually have two script steps. The first is configure RAG account. So configure RAG account is used to basically hook into a AI provider. In the example here, we're hooking into OpenAI, but we also support our own AI model server as well. The second one is perform RAG action. So there are several RAG actions, including adding data to your RAG server, removing that data, and even prompting that data, right? So you can add documents, and using those documents, you can actually ask questions to the RAG server. In the case of using our own AI model server, everything is done locally. So that includes the RAG cache and all that good stuff. Okay. Next up, let's talk about how we can customize models with FileMaker data. So here we actually have two script steps. The first is configure regression model. So this allows developers and users to make numerical predictions based on embedding vectors. So previously we introduced embedding vectors, I think back in the previous version of FileMaker, and now we're expanding functionality to let you make predictions based on those. The next one is fine-tune model. And for fine-tuning models, you can basically customize an LLM using your own data to generate text that is kind of customized to what you need it to do. Okay, let's dive a little deeper. So for configure regression model, like I said before, this is primarily used for making numerical predictions. And as you can see in the video on the right, it's very simple, right? You train a model and then you can just make predictions right away. Okay. And for fine tuning, there's a nice script step to fine tune model. It's may look a little complicated, but it's not that bad. So there's your account name, which you'll set up, a base model. In this case, we're going to use Cogemma, a training data file, and there is an example training data on the bottom. This is all in JSON format, and then just some parameters, right? Some benefits of fine tuning is that you can customize model responses to fit your specific domain knowledge. And a nice little bonus as well is that you can actually reduce prompt token usage, right? In the next slide, I'll basically show the difference. So on the left-hand side, we have a fine-tuned CoGamma, and on the right-hand side, we have CoGamma normally. So they're both generating a find request based on the question, what ingredients are at Trader Joe's? And you can see the fine-tuned model actually generates a FileMaker find, whereas on the right-hand side, the base CoGamma, it just answers it generally, right? And it's not that useful. So fine-tuning is pretty powerful and pretty useful as well. Okay.
All right, and this is where we're waiting for questions. So I think as Angie said at the beginning, please use the chat and chat to everybody if you have questions. I do have a few commonly asked questions that we can use to get started. So first, what are the kinds of problems that developers can solve using the new AI script steps that they couldn't do before?
Yeah, I think maybe the simplest to understand is that now you can basically have a chatbot in your database, right? Because we support so many ways to perform finds, to perform SQL queries using natural language. We really open up like this more user-friendly way to interact with your database.
And for a proof of concept development, without wanting, like if you're doing a proof of concept and don't want to make a large hardware investment, do you have a model recommendation for a small text generation model? Or would you recommend that for that proof of concept, developers use one of the public models?
Yeah, so I would say to start off, I would use the CoGamma 7 VIT. That has the least hardware requirements, at least for the models that we support. But other than that, I would say if you have a Mac, we use Apple Silicon's MLX model and the neural engine. So we support that, and that usually is pretty fast for inference.
All right. When using public AI models, do you have recommendations for how to estimate and predict costs, and then further down the line as something goes into control costs further down the line?
So for cost, this is really gonna depend on what model you're using. So I checked earlier with OpenAI's ChatGPT, they charge by, I think, million tokens. And so really, like the more you use it, the more it's gonna cost you. As far as strategies to control that, you can basically try and prompt engineer your way to kind of, how to say, to lessen the amount of tokens you need to use. So like prompt engineer and then have a shorter prompt and or have shorter responses, right? If cost is an issue and like for continued deployment, we do provide our AI model server where you can just handle everything yourself.
Yes. There's a question. Is it reasonable to expect Claris to provide sample files? And I'm not sure which this David is asking about. So
Yeah,
Well, one thing, I was just saying that I've been seeing demos and early demos coming from a number of platinum providers out there. So in the next few weeks or so, look for, Proofgeist or Soliant, and I think you're going to be seeing a lot of stuff coming out of there with, their white papers on how to use it and that. I guess one of the Derek's going to talk about, I think we have a white paper coming up soon too, right?
yeah, to be sure to be out. Yep. Mhm. And not only that, too, we work pretty closely with the ID team to create some good examples for a lot of the script steps. So those could be some useful knowledge as well to start with.
So yeah, one place to start is the help documentation. There are very rich examples for all the new script steps and calculations related to AI. Also, I just dropped a link to the using LLMs with Claris FileMaker course we released in Claris Academy just on Monday. And Mark LaRochelle has built a pretty rich example file for that course and goes deep into the generate response from model, perform find by natural language, and perform SQL query by natural language script steps. Again, with use cases and examples and the sample file so that you can work through the exercises as he presents them. And also, if you saw the first community live we did on July 9th with Ronnie, his sample file that he did his zero to chat demo, that is available if you find the thread for that episode in Claris community. He's got that file ready to go, and you can start playing in that framework, in that very simple framework file as well. So I hope that is enough resources to help people get started. And are there more questions about AI? If not, I can go back to my list. I guess this is just a general question about how would you recommend developers think about making a decision between using a public model or setting up the AI services on their own FileMaker server?
Yeah, I'll add my 2 cents, and then Derek, if you have anything else to add, please feel free to chime in. I would say the main consideration, first and foremost, is data security, right? Because if you're gonna send data to like a LLM, either like a public LLM that's OpenAI, Anthropic, so on and so forth, then like you kind of give them your data, right? And from there, then on, you don't really have like you don't really know what's gonna happen to that data. It could be used for training, it might not. Whereas if you set up your own local LLM server, right, with our AI model server, you do know exactly what's going on, and there are protections as well for us to basically keep your information safe as well. So I would say the main consideration for me would be data security.
I would say I would add on to that. I mean, I think that was perfect. Cost as well. If you have the hardware for it, hosting our AI model server can be very, very cost effective rather than paying a reoccurring subscription or for token usage.
Well, that is the end of our AI questions. Oh,
One snuck in.
oh, I just saw one come in. Looking for when will AI work on the development side? So I know Ronnie showed this very briefly at Claris Engage, but when, for example, even chatting with a model and getting back a suggestion for a script or a calculation to make copy and paste better into FileMaker, or to have AI embedded into the FileMaker development space.
I don't think we have a when, but it is absolutely in our public roadmap already for things that we're working on. Ronnie, as Rosemary said, absolutely demoed that at the Engage keynote. So we're referring to it as coworker for scripts and calculations and so forth.
But there are two parts of that thing: is the integration side, the FileMaker side, to help with the updating it, but is also training the models out there right now. I mean, we've started running a large number of queries through about FileMaker and stuff like that, and I'm not sure it's at the point right now where you would really want to trust it. It's getting very close, and probably in 3 or 4 months, maybe it'll be a lot better. But there seems to be a lot more training that needs to be required in these models out there, and we're looking at different ways to do that and what to help that. But I'm not sure whether you'd want it inside FileMaker when you only get the answer correctly 2/3 of the time.
Yeah, that's a good point. I remember when 2 years ago when ChatGPT first became a thing, a lot of developers were asking ChatGPT to help them write scripts and calculations, and then coming back to the Claris community and saying, hey, this calculation doesn't work, because ChatGPT had hallucinated a function that just doesn't exist. So I guess we have one last question. And I don't know which Derek is best to answer this, but what's the difference between RAG and fine tuning, and why would you do one or the other to get better answers?
Okay. So for RAG, kind of big benefit of RAG is you can feed it like documents, as that includes like PDFs and stuff, and that becomes like a context for the LLM, right? And if your question is not covered by the context, it can actually just say like, I don't know. So it's less prone to hallucinations. For fine-tuning is really good at basically like getting some underlying patterns in like the training examples. So this can be good for basically if you have a specific format of data, like doing like find requests, right? In the example I showed earlier, because you can basically have PDFs that say, oh, here's a find request, here's a find request, right? But then if you prompt for like a new find request, RAG won't be able to handle that. Whereas a fine-tuned model, fine-tuned specifically to do find requests, will be able to do so. So RAG is good for if you need like correctness in answers, whereas fine-tuning is good for if you're good with like giving like a pattern of responses.
Thanks. That actually is really helpful. All right. Well, with that, Robert, why don't you take it away to talk about the Claris platform?
Awesome. Thanks, Rosemary. And thanks, Derek. That was awesome. I'm very excited about all that. All right. I'm also very excited to hear from the poll results how many of you are familiar with Studio. But I did want to take just a moment to make sure that for those that may not be as familiar, we're all anchored on the role that Studio plays within the Claris platform. Many of you have probably seen a version of this T-shaped diagram. We've been sharing it quite a bit because it really is our view of the world where your data is at the center. On the left-hand side, we're talking about internal-facing apps. Typically, this is solved by your FileMaker solutions that you leverage today. Along the bottom is connections to third parties. Connect plays a huge role in that, in addition to the capabilities you have, obviously, in FileMaker scripting. And then on the right-hand side here is cases where you need to extend your FileMaker solution to a broader audience out in the web. Okay, so this is data collection from maybe thousands of users at a time, or being able to take some subset of your data and make it available to those users. So just touching on this again, the three main roles or three main use cases we see for Studio, one being collecting data from public-facing forums, sharing data outside of the core team. So maybe you've got a set of users inside of your company that are living in FileMaker every day, but you have some extended members of that team that don't use FileMaker, but they still need to see things like dashboards to see progress of projects, or maybe even influence projects through things like a Kanban board, things of that nature. And then most recently, we've introduced the ability for you to extend your solution to the web so that external users can come in, see data, update it in a client portal type of experience. Now, all three of these can sort of be touched by pieces of FileMaker today, whether that's using the WebDirect client or using a third-party integration, or building your own custom web published interface. Each of those, though, come with their own drawbacks. WebDirect obviously is really FileMaker in a web browser, so not really a web experience. And of course, our scaling and licensing doesn't lend itself well to if you had thousands plus users trying to submit data. Likewise, the third-party integrations are costly. It's more overhead management that you've got to do. And then if you're creating something like a custom web published page, that's a pretty sizable learning curve to be able to write your own custom interface that works through the data and the data API. So for those reasons, we've been working on Studio now for the last few years. And while I'm not going to go through the exact demo that I went through beginning of last week, I did want to show the end results of this. So if you want to see how I built what you're about to see, please go back to that recording. But what we have here, if I open FileMaker up, is a FileMaker solution. This is the tool that the internal team would be using. They're going out onto job sites, taking in the request, processing the work. This solution has just shy of 9,000 records in it currently. And that's important because I want to show how we're exposing that data on the Studio side. So this is Studio. It's broken into three main areas: hubs, which is where you have your sort of app experiences, your interfaces. Then you've, of course, got your users. This is a sample hub, a sample org, so I don't have a lot of users. And then, of course, your data sources. This will show you both data that is stored inside of Studio, and in this case, data actually that's stored inside of FileMaker as well. So this data source, or leveraging FileMaker as a data source, is a new feature that was released as part of FileMaker 2025. So it does require your server be updated to Server 2025. But once that's done, you can actually make a connection between a FileMaker file. Again, this is hosted on a server, and have access to tables that you specified. So here we've got all the same record data and that full almost 10,000 records. From here, we can then build interfaces on top of it. So if I go back over to my hubs, I've got two views here. One is for data collection. So if I open this up, let's just open this as a new tab. I can fill in some information to all of it here, but just enough so that we can see it go through. We'll make this about plumbing. It's an emergency. Something now. And when I hit submit, we'll see almost instantly that new record has come in my FileMaker source. And we can see here that record that I just created. So that's data collection, so data coming in. We also have this one, the client portal that we've created. So I've built up a view that sits on top of this data source that will allow end users to log in and see their relevant work requests. So to showcase this example, I'm going to open up a new private browser window, and I'm just pasting in the URL for that particular view. It's going to ask me to log in. The user I'm logging in as is an external identity provider user, so it's actually leveraging Cognito. When I log in, I will then see not only this view and list of records, but I will be filtered down to just the records particular to my account. And in fact, you can see that record that we just submitted in the step before this, where I can come in here and again, make some changes. So in here, you see we have a ratings field. It's not currently filled out, but if I give this a 5-star and switch back, you can see that FileMaker then stores the value of that 5-star rating as a number in a field. So that was just, again, a quick overview of what you can create using the combination of FileMaker and Studio, especially now with the release of 2025 server, which will allow us to tap directly into those data sources on the FileMaker side. So with that, Rosemary, let's open it up to questions.
Yeah. So please, if you have questions about Claris Studio. First question, how did or does the user get their login info?
So that is sent by whoever the administrator is. And in this case, we were using Cognito. So you would create their Cognito accounts and then send them an email so that they can create it. Once they create it, it'll automatically grant them access to that hub by virtue of putting them in a group in Claris Studio. And then they just log in the way that you saw there.
But you can create anonymous forms for people just entering data also. So if you don't want to create accounts for people.
That will only work for the data collection side of it. But if you want them to log in and see their information, specifically their information through the custom view, then yeah, you'd want them to log in. And then we will, through some configuration, again, that you can see in my previous recording, exactly how we were doing that, set up a filter so that they see just their records based on the email address that they've logged in with. One thing I'll call out, if you are interested in getting some step-by-step instructions on leveraging Studio, we have 2 engineering blog posts that cover both setting up a fairly complex data collection form. And by that, I mean, it does things like conditional visibility of objects, conditional page navigation, using calculations to show summary pages, things of that nature. And then there's a second blog post that goes into capturing that data and leveraging Connect to do some processing of the data before sending it into FileMaker. And then we have a third blog that's coming out, it should be out next week, that will walk through actually the step-by-step guide on how to create the custom view and leverage the data sources in exactly the way that I did it in the recording from last week.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. I did just drop the links to both of those first 2 blog posts, engineering
Awesome.
blogs, into the chat. And as Angie pointed out, the other change that we made with FileMaker 2025 is that Claris Studio is now included with most FileMaker licenses. So if you have, for the most part, annual licensing under subscription or perpetual license with active maintenance, Claris Studio and Claris Connect are both included. Next question, are there plans to add the ability to move or copy views created in one Claris Studio org to another?
There are plans, and actually for folks interested in giving us some testing, we have an ETS program for Studio where we're testing some functionality that will let you copy effectively in a hub within your Studio org. So not just the view, but the views inside of a hub, as well as the data underlining it, the data source rather underlining it. We still have some things to work out there, so it's not something that's on the immediate horizon to release, but that is something that we see quite a bit of desire around, especially for developers that support multiple clients that are looking to deploy a solution that leverages not just a FileMaker solution, but something they've built in Connect as well.
Given that our audience has many people from Australia and New Zealand and other parts of the Asia Pacific region, will we be standing up a Claris Studio data center that is more performant in Australia than the current Japan and US West data centers?
So we don't have immediate plans for a data center in Australia just yet. For the most part, folks are seeing good performance connecting to the Tokyo data center. So especially folks in Japan, be aware that there is a data center in Tokyo. We are hearing some requests around a data center in Australia, also though for data privacy reasons, needing the data to stay inside of the country. So that's something that we are absolutely looking at, but we don't have a date to announce something in the Australia region at this moment.
All right, and so just when would a developer use Claris Studio, and where might they use WebDirect? There's still, I mean, this is a question we're seeing a lot.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. We see the WebDirect and Claris Studio as 2 tools in your toolbox. And so when there's instances where you need effectively a FileMaker experience, but in a web browser, because you want to ensure that end users don't need to deal with installing, or maybe they cannot deal with installing a FileMaker client and maintaining the versions, but you still want them to have access to your solution in a way that is, feels very FileMaker client-esque. WebDirect is great for that. It is, very deeply rich in functionality and features, as it is that extension of FileMaker. Where WebDirect has challenges is really around extending that to someone that's completely outside of your team. So there are some very narrow use cases where WebDirect might be sufficient, but oftentimes when you've got, let's say, a sign up for an upcoming event, or a school system, a school year is getting ready to start, you need a bunch of students to register. That's a case where you might have multi-thousands of users over the course of a couple of weeks hitting your submission. We had a case in Europe where they were doing a registration for, or they were doing, you could effectively, what's the word, adopt an animal for a park, do fundraising kind of thing. And that was something that they were promoting on local television, and they needed to be able to handle, again, thousands of users submitting their requests. That's something that WebDirect just wasn't intended for. It wasn't built for that kind of experience, both from a technical standpoint and from the way that our licensing works. Similarly, if you have cases where you've got external users that are, you may have lots of external users that are infrequently connecting, meaning that a particular user, in the case of PeakWorks, that's someone that is a company that would be doing, work request submissions. You may have a customer that wants to check in on their status, and they're doing it every couple of days because it's something urgent. But then once that work request is done, they might not look at it again for 2 weeks, a month, whatever it is. But you might have lots of those kinds of people. So again, you have these very sporadic, large number of users looking to gather or look at information or submit new information. Again, something that WebDirect really isn't well suited for. Something that more often what you're doing is building a custom front end, or you're using a third party to augment the Claris platform to provide that kind of client portal type of experience. Both of which are learning curves beyond what most FileMaker developers currently have, and really we don't want them to have to overcome, because that then takes them away from other aspects of the business that they're good at improving. So those are two areas that really aren't well served by WebDirect, and we see as a gap in tools needed that Studio can fill. I also want to stress that Studio continues to evolve. I know some of you may have looked at it very early on, and where we were originally when we were focused on the ability to do data collection comparative to where we are with custom views is pretty substantial, but obviously not to the degree that FileMaker is yet. And we're not trying to replicate 100% of what FileMaker solves for today. We're really looking at where are the gaps in the needs that you have to build a solution for your customers, which includes both internal team members as well as external users. So hopefully that helps kind of make it clear sort of where the two products and really the entire platform all hangs together.
All right. There's a question about Claris Connect, and I'm not sure if we have anyone here who can for sure or authoritatively answer it. And that is that according to the most recent release notes, one of the enhancements to the FileMaker connector is adding the upload to container action. But this customer is saying they don't see it when they look at that connector.
Yeah, I don't know that I can answer that. So the new FileMaker, I mean, I know that we have both connectors in the product right now.
Yeah.
And I've seen that. I know I've got tripped up on looking at the correct one, but I'm pretty sure that that is in the public release at this point. But I'm not close enough to it to say 100%.
Yeah. So my two things would be, as Robert said, make sure you're using the Claris FileMaker connector and not the FileMaker Cloud or FileMaker Server connector. So be looking at the new connector. And if it's not that, you can either reach out to me, or I would reach out to support in your region to see if there's, maybe something misconfigured in your specific Claris Connect instance. And then last question, is there a link to which countries have, I think he's saying a FileMaker data center. Do we have a public list anywhere of what products are available in what data centers?
I believe we have it in the knowledge base, but I don't have it offhand. There's one for Studio, there's one in Frankfurt, US West, and then Tokyo are the 3 data centers that we have. And when you sign up, or when you provision your Studio account, depending on what region you're in, we automatically choose the one that's closest to you. But yeah, Rosemary, maybe that's something we can post after. I don't have handy where we have that listed.
we'll find that, and I'll add it to the resources when I publish my wrap up for this episode tomorrow. And so with that, Rick, you're up. And as you get started sharing, I'm going to launch our last poll. So please do take a couple seconds before you leave us today to answer our closing questions.
All right, so I am going to cover everything excuse me, I'm trying to get rid of Slido at the same time I'm trying to present. Wonderful. I'm going to cover everything that wasn't just covered. That's not AI and is not Studio, but I'm going to fly over really quick so that it leaves a maximum amount of time for any questions you may have, since so many of you have either watched or can watch the recording. So I sort of cherry picked what's available there. We did over 100 enhancements in the FileMaker parts of the platform. And so some of the ones I want to call out that are key new scripts and functions that are non-AI. There's a new go to list of records script step that is essentially enabling a number of new techniques. Vince Manano, when he presented last Tuesday with me on this, had a demo of that and has subsequently created a blog and a file to download. And so you're going to want to understand that. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. Then we have a number of functions as well that we've introduced: get fields on the layout, get record IDs from found set, JSON parse, and all of those you can use without AI, but you can also leverage them with AI. So they serve a dual purpose. JSON parse is something that we've introduced that makes JSON potentially radically more performant. Clay, I believe, has a slide on that. They could go into details. And then this get text from PDF calculation allows you to query the text in a PDF in a container field rather straightforwardly, and it doesn't rely on AI, although it could be leveraged by AI. About the go to list of records, Rosemary had pointed this out a couple of days ago, but there was someone that posted on the community that I found a go to list of records faster than omitting a record in a loop. Instead of in a loop, identify each record, constructing an array of a list of record IDs as you go via a variable. And it says go to list of records is a terrific addition. So I would highly recommend that you download that file and read that blog that Vince posted as well. There are a number of key developer quality of life enhancements we've made, from the ability to do cold folding or collapsing scripts to make them more readable and digestible, especially as they get complex. We have begun to refresh the user interface on the Mac OS side of the house first, the FileMaker Pro, to just give it a more modern look, more Apple-like, with font spacing, padding, and refreshing the status toolbar and that sort of thing. You can now add and remove objects to groups without having to blow up the group and reassemble the group. And some people's groups become quite elaborate. So now it's straightforward just to do that. So that's a real sleeper that a lot of people benefit from. You can now organize your custom functions in folders, and we have introduced the ability to not only get the updates through our Sparkle update notification system, but also the major releases as well, making it easier rather than having to go around and install. There's a number of performance. This is server side. There's a number of performance enhancements we made, and security as well. The server, from parsing JSON to caching parse JSON for better performance, optimizing thread and memory management, improving our sending the thread pool, and some things that impact the admin console and the admin API. All of them to tune and get greater performance out of the hardware that you have. On the security front, we've continued to enhance our Let's Encrypt support. Now it's supported on all the platforms, Mac, Windows, and Ubuntu. And now it's a lot easier to schedule and set up Let's Encrypt through the server admin console. You no longer have to worry about shell scripts and that sort of thing. On the FileMaker Go front, there's a few enhancements. If, say, you're using FileMaker Go on an iPad and you have to use a keyboard, we'll now respect the arrow keys and the space and enter for navigation. Hover state support, same thing. If you're using on an iPad and you're using an Apple Pencil, you're going to have that hover state ability. And if you didn't realize this, you can run FileMaker Go in Vision Pro. And so one of the things that would be handy is if you're looking at a field or a button that you actually know that you're acting upon that. So it benefits from there as well. And a new sort of nice little addition is that we now will store the FileMaker files for FileMaker Go in the Files app. We'll create a folder for it and access them from there. A few enhancements we made to WebDirect. We now have right-click context menu when you're clicking on objects in a WebDirect page. You can now customize the homepage configuration if you don't want people just to go to the plain vanilla default WebDirect homepage, and you can now do that through the admin console as well, making it far more discoverable and easier to pull off. We have now put in place something that will intercept when a user clicks on the back button in their browser in WebDirect, and of course gets kicked out of where the session they were in, and they end up on the page again where they are at, and potentially losing the data they are entering. So now there's a warning that comes up that lets them to make a decision to not do that. And we've done some performance improvement there as well. And then I've got screenshots if we talk about them that I could show, but I'm going to stop sharing right now. And then depending on the questions, I believe, Clay, that you can talk about how we eked so much performance out of JSON with JSON parse.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
So first question is, when you're using the get text from PDF function, does that PDF need to be formatted with OCR or available text inside of it?
So on all the platforms, it can read the text out of the PDF if the PDF is text with fonts and drawing that stuff. Now, if you have a PDF that has images in it that need to be OCR'd if you're running on an iOS or Mac OS platform, if it doesn't find any text by scanning the PDF for actual text, it'll then run it through basically the get live text function and then pull the text out using OCR at that point.
Okay. So just to be clear, first, if there's text in the PDF, it'll use that. And second, if you're on Mac or iOS, it will use the same operating system level tools to pull text out on an image-based PDF.
Yeah.
But if you are on Windows, you will need to continue to use the techniques for doing OCR that are available through, I think there are a few plugins that can do that, or you'll need to do the OCR outside of FileMaker.
And then on the JSON performance thing, if you really want to get into the weeds of what the JSON performance stuff, there's the session from Engage that I did earlier this year. You can watch that, and it's about 25 minutes of stuff. I'll show this one slide, which, the quick thing that for people just to worry about is the worst way to deal with JSON is to keep toggling back and forth, like where in demo JSON 1 is a text field and demo JSON 2 is another, toggling back and forth. The caching that was in the previous versions and this current version will have a hard time trying to keep the most recently parsed version available, because each thread can basically only store one cached version. The better thing that works in even the last year's release or this year's release is to do all the operations on one field. So once demo JSON 1 has been cached, the next time it's used, it'll just use the same parsed version that was generated then, and then you go on to other ones. Now in the latest version, we now, whenever a variable is stored, whether it's a global variable, a script variable, or a calc variable, we'll always store the parsed version or the binary version of the JSON with it. So the preferred way of doing it, starting with this release and going further, is once you get the text of the JSON, whether it comes out of a text field, whether it comes over insert from UL or insert from URL, or comes from a text file of some sort, is to run it through JSON parse and then store it into a variable. At that point, the variable will parse it, it will store the binary representation there, and then all the operations using those variables will be very fast, or a lot faster than they were previously. Text fields and global fields in tables, when you put values in them, only the text is stored. The binary representation will not. So the main optimization is done by using variables, whether $, or just the individual ones inside calc functions. Also, parameters are passed around the same way as variables. So if you're passing a parameter between script steps, if you're passing a variable down through a parameter to another script, the parsed version will be there too.
Yeah, so related to that, so if a variable containing JSON is parsed the first time you query it as JSON, what's the benefit of using JSON parse?
Well, if you just pass it in into a JSON function, the parsed version went there. It will be parsed and then stored off at the thread cache, but it won't save it in the input parameter. Input parameters into functions and are usually read-only. We can't modify them, so we can't store the binary parsed version of it with it. So you really need to set a variable, whether you're setting it with using a let statement inside a calc function or using the set variable script step, and use the JSON parse at that point. Now the output from any JSON function like JSON get element will be parsed also, and will be stored and saved if you put it into a variable on that. But if you really want to get into the weeds of all this, you really need to, it'll be a lot longer conversation. But you'll always be safer by just calling JSON parse on the thing and sticking it into a variable. That's the short, 5-second do this and everything will be better.
All right, thank you. Just a question, general question or observation, is that a lot of people are concerned about the removal of support for multiple FileMaker Pro versions on Windows. Well, the specific question, is this considered an error in judgment, even with the unsupported workaround that we've published?
So yes, this is a side effect of being able to use Sparkle to deliver the major updates, and so we don't change the name of the folder. There's a workaround there, but we're aware of this, and we're actively working on the ability to support that again. Especially for developers, we know that we all have multiple versions on our systems. Mac, it's pretty straightforward. But yeah, we're aware of that.
All right, thanks, Rick.
Address it.
And I'll just add also, we're aware of that. We're also aware of several issues that have been reported in the community and through support, and are actively working on fixes for many of them. So stay tuned for that first VREV coming in the next couple of months, as per usual. A question that just, I guess, came just to me is, more broadly, will Claris explore creation of our own AI model to help developers? So for that developer support, coworker or whatever we're calling it.
Talk about training a model on our scripts and calculations, and maybe pointing to our online help and all of it in our knowledge base, and then taking all that. Play.
Well, yeah, no, we as I mentioned before, that we need a well-trained model out there. Whether it comes from us, comes from a partner, I'm not quite sure, how it's going to be presented and stuff like that. But there is definitely work going on this. Before the end of the year, we should have a very good model, a FileMaker model that you maybe will go to tech support to get it, or be off our help menu, or in the product. I'm not. The actual execution of it and where it's going to come from is still kind of in the air, but we definitely are working on getting a model out there that knows all about FileMaker.
Excellent. That's, I think, exciting to many developers. This is my last call for questions, as we have about 5 minutes left. As you think of your last minute questions, if you want to share them, I'm going to share out the results of our closing poll. Our first question: when do you plan to install FileMaker Server 2025 in production? 25% of the respondents already have. And then we've got 20% saying in the next 6 weeks, so meaning sometime in the August timeframe, about 20% in September, and 25% in calendar Q4, and a few not planning to deploy FileMaker Server 2025 at this time. And for Claris Studio, again, will you test Claris Studio for a future project? 30% already using Claris Studio, 19% in the next 4 weeks, 19% in the next 12 weeks, 6% later in the year, calendar Q4, and 25% have no plans to try Studio. And our last question: what FileMaker 2025 feature are you most excited about? This one I'm showing in Slido if you want to see the word cloud, but all about AI. One person said JSON speed improvements, and a couple responded with the direct connection and integration between Claris Studio and Claris FileMaker Server. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the panelists. I'm seeing this in chat, and I also want to say thank you myself. Ooh, last question: are these new features available on FileMaker Cloud?
Most of them would be AI services coming through the server, will not be in cloud, will come in later part of August.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate, if you're using, you can use all the script stops in FileMaker Pro, but you wouldn't be able to run them server side. So if you want to use generate response from model, you would have to use that in a local script. You wouldn't be able to use it in a server script at this time. But they are coming soon, as Rick said. So as we wrap up, thank you, Derek, Robert, Clay, and Rick, for your tireless work, both developing FileMaker and Claris Studio, and also presenting today and also earlier in the month. Please join me for our next Community Live, which is on August 7th, and we're going to be back to our normal morning Pacific time frame. And for that, I'll be joined by Mark Richmond and Greg Lane from Skeleton Key to talk about making your FileMaker apps run faster and smoother. So performance is always a great topic. So with that, thank you again for joining us, and we will publish the recording probably tomorrow morning, and I will also share all the resources we published in chat in the Claris community thread. So we'll see you all in a few weeks. Thanks.